Hello, writers and crafters. I'm Valerie Isan.
And I'm Eric Mertz.
And this is episode 59 of the podcast. And it is March 15th, 2022, as we record this. Today, we're talking about writing retreats and residencies. This podcast is sponsored by our patrons at patreon.com/Valerie Isan. For as low as $1 a month, you can get a shout out on the podcast and we can make announcements for you on the podcast. So if you have a book release or a class that you're teaching and you want to put it out to the world, then you can let us know and we can make that announcement for you. All right. What are you reading, Eric?
Oh my gosh,
it's the first question I always ask.
I know, but I always feel, and I know what book I'm reading, but it always feels a little like it's like pressure. Like it better be a cool book. This time it's a cool book. Again, 2 in a row. I'm reading Jeffrey Deaver. He's a short story author, novelist. He wrote The Bone Collector, a lot of those very, very good twisty mysteries, but he has a collection of books called Twisted. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of his short stories, and he's really known for writing a good literary twist. That's his big calling card. And so I'm reading that book of short stories, and I'm only 2 into it, and they are as good as promised. They're Sweet. Excellent. Yeah. Highly recommended. Yeah, if you like the art of the short story, then check out Twisted by Jeffrey Deaver. What about you?
As per usual, I'm reading more than one book. I finally finished Seed to Dust by Mark Hamer, the nature writing.
Right.
That was good. I recommend that. And so I started reading a memoir called Fox and I blanked on who wrote it. I should have looked it up before I started talking, but it's a biologist that lives out in, I don't know if it's Montana or I don't know, just somewhere out in the middle of nowhere.
Is that Catherine Raven? Catherine Raven?
Yeah, I think so. I remember Raven being the last name. So she's a biologist and she lives out in the middle of nowhere, and a fox starts showing up exactly at 4:15 every single day. And so she just starts reading The Little Prince to him.
That wasn't where I thought that was going.
So I've just started, it's only like a chapter or 2 in, so I don't know, but I love memoir and, animals. Right. And so it just seems like my bag. But I also received, working at the bookstore, I order a lot of books. And I just received yesterday Body Work by Melissa Febos. That's a craft book on, it's a kind of memoir, but it's also a craft book on writing memoir. Not so much a craft book, but more like not being apologetic about the navel gazing part of memoir writing. So I'm all for that.
Right.
Since I'm writing a memoir right now, I want to soak up all of the good juju from Melissa Febos. And that was a book that I heard about on Rachel Herron's podcast, because at the end of her interviews, she always asks about, what's the, greatest book you've read in the last year or whatever. And why did you like it? And so this was a book that came up, and I think even Rachel read it after that too. So I was like, I have to read that book, but it just came out yesterday, or no, today. It's released today. You
got it yesterday.
Yeah, which actually surprised me, because often when I can usually get new releases maybe a week ahead of time. They just come, prepared, and right, it's a perk. Right. It's a perk of working in the book selling industry.
Oh, absolutely.
But so I only got it a day early. What's up with that? So I'm taking a break on Fox and I, even though I've just started it, and I'm going to read Body Work first.
That's where the taking a break came in. You're 1 chapter in and you've already moved on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not intentionally.
No, it's hard. I meard look, wherever we go, we're writers. We hang out with other writers, and writers talk about what they read, and it's hard to stay on that book. So I know where you're coming from. I've got 2 or 3 others sitting on the shelf. I'm not getting through all these short stories without having a little side affair with another book. I'm sure that'll happen.
Oh, that reminds me of a funny story. Maybe you won't find it funny, but my husband started reading Moby Dick. Like he'd never read it before. And that's like a tome. It's
Oh yeah.
humongous. It's
Yeah.
so big. And so he had just started reading it. In fact, he wasn't even at the book. Like he was just at not the appendix, but the pre stuff,
Yeah.
like the Roman numeral pages, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Before the actual books. So he was just reading that. And he'd been reading it. I think he had started it. He reads at night in bed a lot. And so I think he had read it in the evening. And then the next day, I got a new release, a book that he had pre-ordered months and months and months ago. And it was a James Corey book, one of the Expanse novels, but this is an anthology of short stories. So I took a picture of it and sent it to him and was like, stop reading Moby Dick because you're going to want to read this first, because Moby Dick would have taken him like 3 months or something with having this James Corey book like right there. And he whipped through the whole series, all of the, I think there's 8 books in the series.
In the Expanse,
yeah.
Like
so he just like flew through those. They were really fast reads. So I know that this will be a much faster. So he's now reading the short stories. He'll go back to the Moby Dick after this.
I started reading Moby Dick stories. I started reading it on New Year's Eve, like almost 20 years ago. For some reason, it was like
you were
like
gonna
3
say
o'clock.
Just New Year's Eve.
Like 3 o'clock on like 3 o'clock on a New Year's Eve. Like, I'm gonna start reading Moby Dick, and like my roommates were getting ready for a party, and they all kept looking at me like, "What are you doing?" Like it was the strangest, because that book is really. Like, I think you identify it as being one of those books. It's full. It's a tome, like you said, and so yeah. But it's good. You know.
Did you read it?
Yeah, I finished it. I mean, I've read it twice. I really like it.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to say that you're still reading it 20 years later.
No, I'm still reading it 20 years later. Yeah, I would say of all those like super code book, it's like a code, right? Like Herman Melville's got kind of a code. It's why I named one of my characters after him. Is I like Herman Melville, but there's like a code to it. And of all the code books, I'd probably go back and read it again. I'm never going to read James Joyce again. I'm never going to read.
What do you mean by code book? I've never heard that before.
It's kind of my term. Like there's writers who I think they use their own language. Like they have their own language. There's just something like you can't mistake James Joyce or Nabokov or some of those other authors who are just very highly stylized. And I think Herman Melville is one of those people where you not only have to get in the rhythm of the story, but you have to get in the rhythm of their writing to read it. And I probably will read Moby Dick one more time in my life.
So why is it code book? Like you crack the code of the language before you can understand it, or what?
I think so. I think so. Yeah. The first time I read Moby Dick in college, I got really frustrated, and just because I wasn't in, like I hadn't figured out how the writing and how it worked, and then once it clicked, it was great. But I had to figure it out. And even when I read it that second time, I still had to like click into it after a while. It's like Faulkner. I don't know if you've ever read Faulkner, but like there is there's like it's like a trust fall. Like you have to just let yourself go and suffer for it for a minute, and then it's great. But some writers have a code. That's my term for it. Code book.
All right.
Code authors. Not one of them.
You're not one of them?
No, I don't know. I can't. I used to want to be, but now that I look at like what just a great accessible story does, that's the goal, is to write a great accessible story.
Yeah. That's my goal too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's talk about it.
Let's talk about writing retreats and residencies. So let's start with basics. Like what's the difference?
Right. Well, a writing retreat, the retreats are pretty broad, right? I mean, I think you can take a personal retreat, and that would be time that you individually set aside. Maybe you maybe you have a second place you can go to, like a cabin that you own or you have access to, or you rent something, and that is a time, just a time that you can go and immerse in writing, right? A retreat, personal, and then there's more formal, right? Like you're running.
Yes. And we can talk about that in a little bit, but yeah, there's also the retreats that are more instructive, like
Oh, right, right.
yeah, like going away to a place and then like the whole morning is spent with your teacher and you're, listening to a lecture or you're doing a workshopping event or something like that in the morning. And then in the afternoon, you can write or go sightseeing or, because usually it's in some exotic place like Venice or something like that.
Yeah,
And then, then you have maybe dinner with the other people that are there or something like that. So I see a lot of those. And they're
I see them.
usually
Yeah.
destination places, France and Venice and
Nova Scotia. There's one I always see in the magazines
oh
for Nova Scotia, and that's a place I want to go. So I figure, what a way to do two things at once, right? You can go get your writing time and see a place. So
yeah.
yeah,
I remember when I had small children, my dream was to go to France or something like that and rent a house for a month with my family. And that my husband would take the kids in the morning and go do whatever they wanted to do. And I would write in the mornings by myself in this little French whatever. And then in the afternoon, we would get together and do family stuff. So it would be a family vacation, but there would be clear delineated lines of this is my writing time and you have all responsibility with children, not me. That was a
that's a
dream I
deal.
had, right?
That is a deal. Don't give that dream up. Just modify it for
Well, I don't have kids at home anymore, so
right. But
and
still go
it's
to France and take the morning to write, and then
right.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, I think that's cool. Well, part of the reason and we've talked about this on the podcast before, but part of the reason I designed the retreat that I'm running is because often, I needed that retreat time to write. I needed the
right,
break away from the dishes and the distraction of dogs barking at everything every 20 minutes and all of the things, I just needed to
right.
not be here and dive into the writing. But I always felt a little bit like guilty for paying money to go away and do this thing. So I felt like, well, I should be learning something if I'm going away to doing this thing. So then I would, join a master class or go to a conference or something where I would be learning and networking with other authors and that fueled me too, but in a different way. And there was no time to write during the conference because you're, at the bar hobnobbing with
You're talking, meeting people, right?
right. It's part of the experience. So then I felt like, well, then I still didn't get time to write. So that's why I liked the setup that I have right now. It's a retreat place. You go away, you have your own place to stay. And in the morning after breakfast, there is some instruction, but it's just like an hour, just a quick, like, here's an idea. And you get to soak up some of that instruction and be motivated. And then you can go off and do whatever you need to do. The other thing I wanted to mention in terms of retreat is I used to think that I had to like get so much accomplished at a retreat and that if I didn't, it wasn't worth the money. Like I was wasting my money if I didn't go and write all these words and get like, a rough draft done or something like that
Right,
in the
right,
short time. And that's totally not what a retreat is about. I mean, it is about having uninterrupted time for you to be creative, but that doesn't necessarily mean new words. If you
right.
need to sleep because you don't get uninterrupted sleep at home, then you can do that at a retreat. You can sleep, you can take walks, you can journal. It doesn't have to be, I mean, certainly bring your work in progress, obviously, and you will, dive into that most likely, but all of the other pieces are part of the retreat experience and not to take that away from you.
Yeah, I think that it's hard. I think I took my first retreat, formal retreat. I think it was 5 years ago through Riders on the River in Wenatchee, and I went to Lake Chelan. really wonderful, beautiful place. And I went into it with, when you said, I'm going to come out of this with a rough draft, I immediately thought, oh my gosh, you read my mind, because that's what I thought. I went up there and you should have seen me. It's like I was packing for battle. I had
Right.
so much stuff, and I was going to write this. I was going to outline the next book, and I was going to write the first, this book. And I got some of that done. And I think that for me, that the real first learning experience in that, in going to a retreat was to, I don't think you can completely like change your writing habits through a weekend or a week. Maybe a month you could change your writing habits, maybe if you immerse that long. But I think it's, going into those experiences open to getting the most out of it, but
Hmm.
really striving to get what you need. I recognized that in the morning one, when I thought, I'm in a beautiful place. I'm going to go for a walk and around this part of Lake Chelan and see it and
Hmm.
experience it. And I lost writing time, but I
Hmm.
saw something beautiful, and that will always be attached to that experience. You can't
Well,
lose
and
that.
that's part of filling the creative well too. I'm sure
Right.
that has helped you as a writer in some way,
Yes.
whether it was
Yes.
just like calming you down so that you could get to that place where you could write after you were
Yep.
done with the walk.
Yeah. Tempering expectations, but also being optimistic while tempering expectations, I think, what I needed. And now, the next time I go, I'll know. But yeah, the educational piece, I think, is a good. I think it's good that you define the difference between sort of conference
Hmm.
and and retreat, because there is no time at most conferences to go off and write. There may be a break between 3 and 5, but you're probably not going to go from 4 classes to go write for 2 hours. So I think it's realistic to think that, like, you're going to get a little bit of both when you go to a retreat, right? You're going to get a little education, and you're going to get some writing time.
If that's the one you sign up for. I mean, there's so many different kinds of retreats too and
Right.
residencies. So yes, you can get the kind where there is no, like you said, it's more of a personal retreat.
Right.
So you're all by yourself, you're responsible for your food, and you don't talk to anybody, you're just there by yourself. And other times you're doing that side by side with other writers, so again, you're still responsible for your own food, and you're there, and you might like hang out in the evening after everybody eats or something like that, and talk about poetry or whatever. But
Right.
during the day it's really about like getting words in. And then there's the kind where food's provided for you and you pay your room and your food. And then, yeah, so there's so many different kinds. So I guess that would be my first tip, would be when you're Googling writing residencies or writing retreats, look at all of them and see what comes with it.
Right. Read
Some
the listing.
read the
Read the
listing.
listing.
Yeah, for sure. Cause it's sometimes it doesn't cost anything. Sometimes it's free, and it's more like a grant, where you win the opportunity to go there for a week or 2 weeks or 5 days, whatever it is. And oftentimes they'll, like Playa, they do it twice a year, and that's in Southern Oregon.
Mm. That's
And and
what I want to do. I love that
yeah, me
landscape.
too.
So
I've
beautiful.
I've applied a couple times for that one, haven't quite gotten it, but my friend Jenny goes like almost every year.
Oh wow.
she,
Good for her.
she seems to always, well, that I shouldn't say that. She went like 2 or 3 times in a row. It seemed like to her, like one time it was she was on the short list. She didn't get in, but then somebody couldn't go at the last minute. So they called her and said, "Hey, it's really short notice, but can you come?" And she said, "Yes."
Yeah, absolutely.
And then she had already applied for the following one and got accepted for that one. So it was like right after the
Lovely.
other.
Lovely.
Yeah. So that was really awesome.
But the key, and I think it's worth, I've done this, I've done a lot of research in this, and you can start that research through one of your big standard writing magazines, right? Poetry and
Mhm.
Writers has a big listing
Poets
of
and writers, definitely. Yeah.
retreats. A.W.P, their the Writers Chronicle. I love their magazine for the listings. And I have seen, sometimes the listing is not complete, and I think it's perfectly okay to ask questions. That's what that info at organization name is for. Go out, ask the questions. What am I going to get? What's it going to be like? What should I expect? Because you really, I think knowing what you want going into anything is key to satisfaction. And so if you have an idea, you want the writing time, or you want the instruction, you want the scenic location, make sure you're checking in with the organization to that you're going to get it. Because you don't want to be surprised when you get there and find out, you're on your own for food and you didn't bring a cooler.
Yeah, right. For instance, I just Googled writing residencies and I clicked on one just totally at random. And it's under the website is thewritelife.com. And one of the options, it's a list of like 34 different writing residencies. And one of them is Kimmel Harding Nelson Center for the Arts. And it's in Nebraska City, Nebraska. And they offer more than 50 residencies a year to writers, visual artists, and composers. And it says, if accepted, you'll receive free housing for stays of 2 to 8 weeks and a $100 stipend per week to cover food. So yeah, that would be really important to know, and if $100 a
Right.
week isn't enough for your food, then bring snacks.
Right. Bring something. Yeah, bring that cooler. So let's talk about the difference then between retreats and residencies, and how residencies work. Because this, I think a lot of people who are familiar with the world of art are familiar. You'll hear about a writer in residence or an artist in residence. You'll hear people about getting residencies in different places, and I think there's a lot of mystery around that, even for people who are involved in this kind of thing, like what a residency actually is.
Well, I think that in some cases, a residency requires something of the person, the writer. So,
Right.
like, yeah, here, come stay for 2 weeks at this place, but then also one time while you're there in the evening, you need to run a workshop
Right.
for the local folks that live in the town. Or
You'll produce a work for an anthology that they're going to publish at another time.
something like that.
Yeah.
I like so it's when you think about applying for a residency, often it's because you want to go to this like exotic locale, Venice or France, or or
Or
some
Nebraska City, Nebraska.
right. Or sometimes I often would have this I think they have this. I don't remember if it's Fish Trap but there's in Oregon there is
Yeah.
a what do you call those really tall things that stand up in the forest? The lookouts.
Oh
You
yeah.
can go and you can, be at a residency in this lookout. And so you're up in the middle of freaking nowhere and you have no neighbors and you're in this giant tree house and all you can see, like, that just sounds magical to me.
2 life goals right there, like going to Joseph, Oregon. I've never been to Joseph. It's on my bucket list, and I will spend a night in one of those fire lookout towers. I have to do it.
Fire lookout. That's right.
Yeah,
Couldn't
that
think of
now
that
you've
word.
just added something to my top bucket list. But you're hitting on something that I think that's important. If you go down the rabbit hole and research, I think the sky's the limit for where, what. I think you can, 2 weeks to 8 weeks, what you listed for that group in Nebraska.
Hmm.
There is something that fits your time frame. If you only have 2 weeks, and maybe you've got family obligations, maybe you don't, maybe 8 weeks sounds great. You can find something that fits. You can probably find something that really narrows in on the subject that you're working. If you're a nonfiction writer, I'm sure you can, really hone down. So research is so key in this area.
Yeah, and like we said before, there's the kind that you pay for, there's the kind that you apply for and hope to get the free one, or yeah, there's a lot of different options in terms of the costs that you yourself would incur. And of course, if you have a day job, you would have to incur the cost of, not getting paid for, or using that as your paid vacation, for instance,
Right.
or something like that. And also, unfortunately, having the kind of boss that would allow you to, not on a whim. What's the word I'm looking for? Because often, you won't find out that you've got this accepted, that you weren't accepted to this residency until, not that it's almost upon you, but close enough that it would be
Yes.
maybe
Yeah.
difficult to ask for time off at that point. So
Right. You
So
better have a good rapport with that boss.
yeah,
The ability
yeah.
to, yeah.
And
I think it's
so
I think it's also worth mentioning. I know that this hasn't never been really a topic that you and we don't dwell on sort of that career and resume building that people in the writing world do, but I think it's worth saying in this place that things like residencies are big resume builders. If you want to build into that, the regular teaching and regular instruction, I think these are the things that when you're applying to things like conferences or other residencies, what you've done in the past really, you can build a resume in this area. This is something you can make a regular part of your writing world.
also I was at a conference and I took a class on applying for artist grants and residencies and such. And two things I came out of the one I went to, it was an A.W.P conference. So the two
Mm,
things I took out of that was you can, so often when you fill out one of these applications, they're pretty intense, like
yeah,
30-page applications. And one of the things you need to write is like your artist statement, kind of like what you stand for as a writer and why you're writing about the things you're writing about and etc. And I always tried every time when I was applying for something to rewrite those to
yeah,
cater to the place that I was applying for, which is good. You do want to keep that in mind. But what I learned at this class was that you actually can just reuse it. Once you write it, you can
yeah,
just keep reusing it, and much of your application can still be reused. Like even if you're applying to the exact same place, reusing your application pieces can work just fine because the not judges, but the
screeners. Yeah, I don't know
yeah,
what you.
the people that are making those decisions, they're different, like every year sometimes.
Right,
So you can send in the same application and a different person will see it and screen it,
right,
and take it to the next level. The other thing is I've heard that if you get a residency, you're awarded one, then the next time you apply, like that can be in your application bio, winner of blah, blah, blah. And the fact that another organization has um, found your writing valuable and wanted to award you this thing does count as extra points, I think, in some way to getting the next
right. Makes sense.
residency or artist grant or whatever that you're applying for.
Yeah, and I've
So
certainly seen that. I mean, I worked for the Willamette Writers for a year as the conference co-chair, and I think that um, it's just an easier thing when you're screening candidates if you know the person and you know their work to be able to vouch for it personally. I've seen this. I've seen how this person performs. I've seen how this person, how people respond to it. And I think too, when you get into things like residencies and retreats that are application based and that are competitive, I still think you probably end up with people who go to those events and probably don't take it seriously. Um, I know that I was on a retreat once where like 5 out of the 6 people were there writing, and one of the people was just there getting away from everyday life, and was
vacation.
really, yeah, it was a vacation. And as much as I think everybody liked that he was taking a vacation, it was a little bit of a distraction from
Mhm.
that. I want to be in this space. So I think when you become a good literary citizen, which is something I think we
Mm,
all we're working towards, um, when you put in a good work and you have a good connection, then people are going to want you back.
yeah. Some of the applications are anonymous.
Hmm. Right.
Some of them ask for references. So, yeah, maybe to weed out those vacationers.
Right.
Not that
Right.
that's a bad thing, like you said, you walked around the
No.
lake and you sleep and, you're just resting and recuperating really from life so that you can access those
Right. There's a
creative
balance
places.
there.
Yeah.
There's a balance there. And I think again, if you're going to produce a piece of work or you're expected to produce something, you want to treat it like you would anything else that you want to do. You want to do it well.
Yeah. When I'm at a retreat with other writers, and I know that that is the main plan, for everyone
Right.
there is to write and to make words. Some places, you can go back to your cabin or your teepee or your, whatever, your room and write. But also many people get inspiration from being outside. And if you're in a beautiful location, you want to sit out by the pool or sit out by the mountain range or whatever and be outside. So if you come across someone at a retreat that is writing, like what is the etiquette there? Like, do you walk up and start talking to them? Probably not.
No.
I, if you like, if I wanted to talk to someone at a retreat and I felt like, okay, I'm done writing for the day, I just can't, my brain, whatever, I want to like connect with someone while I'm here. I think what I would do is go to the place, to the common area, wherever that is, with a book or knitting or whatever it
Yeah.
is, and
Whatever your
go there
pastime is.
and just hang out and just do that, so that
Hmm.
you look approachable, so that if somebody else comes in, or when someone comes in and you try to make eye contact, so there are subtle ways to like let people know, hey, I'm open to being talked to and being approached.
Right.
um, and yeah, it's, I think, really important to honor that etiquette, because if you are, I mean, we're all writers, we know, like if you're in the middle of and you get interrupted, like it's
Right.
gone. You've ruined
Right.
it.
My dad used to always have this thing. He'd say library rules, right? Like when we're here, it's a library rules, and that meant you're quiet, you respect other people's space. Kind of a don't speak until spoken to, but like more of a don't speak until there's an understanding. And I think, yeah, if you go on one of these events, you should assume the other people are writing until you find that connection that says you're not.
Hmm.
And that's, yeah, it's different. And again, that's very different than a writers conference, because it's very clear in a writers conference. You've got the classroom environment, and then you
Hmm.
have everywhere else. And the classroom environments where everybody's listening, and the hallways and the cafeteria and the bar are the places where people are networking, and it's really clear. But it's not so clear here.
Although there are some, I mean, again, there are a lot of introverted people that really don't want to talk with people. But if they don't have, like, for instance, the Willamette Writers Conference, most years I went, I had a hotel room right there.
Hmm.
A couple of times I went and did not have lodging at that location. So that meant in between times when I needed a break, like I had to just be at a little, table in one of the hallways or something. And so if I would see someone like typing away, writing on their laptop in one of those little side tables, I often would not approach. Or if
Yeah, I
I
guess
did, if
so.
it was somebody I really wanted to talk to because I'd heard them speak and I really wanted to like connect with them and say, hey, what great talk or whatever, then I would just be really kind, I guess, and like approach and be like, hey, I just wanted to say hi. If you're in a space where you're not wanting to, talk, I totally understand. And like just let them off the hook if that's really what they wanted, was to not talk with anybody right then.
Yeah. I forgot. Yeah, there is that element, especially in the mornings when people are getting ready for classes, that those instructors will be re-
Mm.
reviewing their material. They'll be focused on something else.
All right. Well, is there anything else, Eric, that you think we should talk about regarding residencies, artist retreats, anything like
I
that?
I think the key, yeah, I think the key is probably to explore, be open,
Hmm.
know what you want, and just read the listings. Just read 20 of them until you find something that sounds right to you. Because
Hmm.
it is a bit of, I think, what if listening through this podcast, people are going to understand that there's no set defined, there's a lot of variety. And I think you're going to then, there's a chemistry, there's going to be the right conference, or sorry, the right residence, the right retreat for you. That's
Right.
the one you go for.
Yeah. Knowing what you want, what you need out of that experience, and then finding that experience and applying for it over and over until you get it.
Right. And we always talk about self-care, and I think like the way you take care of yourself here is you prepare. Like you
Hmm.
prepare, you make sure you're in the right place, because it can really jolt you if you're not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And logistic wise, I think it would be smart to have like a folder on your desktop or something that had those things in it that often are required for the application. Like, you know,
Right.
the artist statement that you wrote, or you know, a sample of your current work in progress, or the references from other writers, etc. And
Right.
so that it's all in one place. So that when you happen upon one that sounds really great and the deadline is like next month, which really isn't enough time sometimes to like get everything together. If it's all set
Right.
up and ready, then you can apply throughout the year when you find things that one time I even got my planner out and I went through like Poets and Writers and found all of the residencies that I wanted to apply for and what their deadlines were, and went in and like wrote them, did the deadlines down in my planner so that I could be
Oh,
like, oh
right.
yeah, that's right, I got to apply for this one. Oh, that's right, I got to apply for this one.
Right. That's a good idea. That's, yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for talking with me today, Eric.
Thanks for, boy, my pleasure. Absolutely. Always a pleasure.
And I
Have a
forgot
great
to look.
writing week, everybody.
Yeah. Awesome. Happy writing. Bye.
Bye.